Okay. All right. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. We are back from our little a little 1 week hiatus. Okay, we're going to jump right back in for our weekly midrash. We are continuing on with the triennial Torah portion. We are still in the book of Numbers. We combined a couple chapters because we were down at the Fifth Sabbath Fellowship last week, so we'll put a couple portions together and deal with the highlights, I guess, from them both. All right, so we will be looking at Pinechas. I should have put an E right there. We'll basically be looking at Numbers chapter 25, 26, and 27. The highlights of 25, 26, and 27 of Numbers. Okay. We want to look at the similarities and underlying principles that we find inside of these accounts within our portion of scripture. We want to look at what went on with Pinechas. We want to deal with the daughters of Zelophehad. We want to also look at the choosing of Joshua. And again, with all of these, looking at a few underlying principles that we see that kind of combine the three of these things inside of these 3 chapters here. And also some various connecting scriptures from the prophets and the apostolic writings, the Brit Hadashah, the so-called New Testament writings. Okay. All right. So before we do that, we want to just deal with the fact that the majority of this portion of these 3 chapters, the largest part of it deals with the census of the people and the division of the land that will be given. You know, that is what 25:4 through 26:65 is actually covering. And we don't want to diminish those verses as if they are insignificant, but they are. But there is a particular theme that I want to bring out, which I feel is very important for our lives right now. So let's read. Let's deal with Numbers 25, 1 through 18. If we can just start to read that. Somebody start reading.
And Israel dwelt in Shittim, and the people began to war with the daughters of Moab. And they invited the people to the slaughterings of the mighty ones. And the people ate the bow down to their mighty ones. Thus Israel was joined to Baal, Pero, and the displeasure of Yahweh burned against Israel. And Yahweh said to Moshe, take all the leaders of the people and hang them up before Yahweh, before the sun, so that the burning displeasure of Yahweh turns away from Israel. And Moshe said to the judges of Israel, each one of you kill his men who were joined to Baal, Pero, and see, one of the children of Israel came and brought to his brothers a Midianite woman before the eyes of Moshe and before the eyes of all the congregation of the children of Israel, who were weeping at the door of the tent of the appointment. And when Pinechas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron, the priest, saw it, he rose up from among the congregation and took a spear in his hand, and he went after the man of Israel into the tent and thrust both of them through, the man of Israel and the woman through her belly. Thus the plague among the children of Israel came to a stop, and those who died in the plague were 24,000. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Pinechas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron, the priest, has turned back my wrath from the children of Israel, because he was ardent with my adore in their midst, so that I did not consume the children of Israel in my adore. Therefore say, see, I'm giving him a covenant of peace, and it shall be to him and to a seed after him a covenant of an everlasting priesthood, because he was honored for his Elohim and made atonement for the children of Israel. And the name of the man of Israel who was struck with the mighty Midianite woman, who was Zimmer, son of Salu, a leader of a father's house among the Shemonites. And the name of Midianite woman who was struck with Kazabi, the daughter of Tesor, he was head of the people of a father's house in Midian. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, distress the Midianites, and you shall strike them, for they distress you with their tricks, with which they deceive you in the matter of Peor, and in the matter of Kazobi, the daughter of leader of Midian, their sister, who was struck in the day of the plague because of Peor.
Okay. All right. So so first of all, we want to be able to understand the level of transgression that was being engaged in here. Right? When we look back, we see that Israel was dwelling with the Moabites. It says that Israel was joined to their God, to that Baal Peor, which Baal Peor basically is saying the Lord of Peor, the God of that place where they were. That the place was Peor, Baal Peor. So they were joined to their God. And also we see a demonstration of the joining of families and gods in the sight of everyone. So when we talk about the idea of being joined, that word is samad. It's a verb that means to join, to yoke, to harness. We talk about yoking. You think about putting two animals together with that hard yoke thing that binds them together. So wherever one moves, the other one moves. It's a serious joining, right? to become like each other. You know, when we think about joining, Yahweh put, you know, Yahweh expects for perhaps others to become like Israel, but you know, he definitely commanded against becoming like the other nations, right? So when we see that they joined unto these other nations, it was definitely in the negative sense, right? Israel began to be part of the worship of Baal. That's what we're looking at here, right? So this joining here was a serious situation that was going on. So we see a manifestation of the joining is seen by the fact that prominent individuals were involved. If we look at, you know, the end of that reading that we just read, the name of the man of Israel was that was struck, who was struck with the Midianite woman was Zimri, son of Salu, a leader of a father's house among the Shemonites. So this was kind of like a you know, an elder type of someone that was in leadership in the you know, among the Shemonites, among the tribes. So you took a prominent individual of one of the tribes, you know, was involved in this other thing, and then you had this Cosby, the daughter of Tsur, the daughter of the head of the people of a father's house in Midian. So you had another prominent individual's father joining with a prominent individual's son of the Shimeonites. So when you think about marriage in these times, you're talking about a joining of families, right? The families are joining, right? It's not like a thing where, you know, we have these kind of separations, how, you know, how we do now. You know, when two families got together, these families were joined to one another, right? So you have these people in prominent positions joining to one another in the sight of everyone, right? So Pinechas, the son of Eleazar, son of Aaron the priest, when he saw what was going on, this was just some gross iniquity that he was witnessing, and was not able to allow for this thing to go forward. It wasn't something that was going on in secrecy, right? It was something that was going on in the sight of everyone, right? So we're talking about something that's going on, gross iniquity that's going down. So Pinechas, you know, he moves into action. Pinechas, by the way, is the mouth of a serpent. When we look at, it sounds, that's funny. It sounds like Pentecost, but that's Greek, right? This word is a combination of the word for mouth, pay, and nakash. So you have the mouth of a serpent. So when you think about the serpent, when you think about nakash, the first place we see this word nakash is actually in Genesis, right? Genesis chapter 3. where it says, now the serpent, now Nakash, was more subtle than any beast of the field, more cunning. That word cunning is skillful, artful. Get at the money. The skillful use of something. When we think about wisdom, that's the idea we see when we deal with cunning, the skillful use of knowledge. The manifestation, we think about wisdom, it is the skillful use of knowledge, right? So it's the manifestation of knowledge. So it's not just about knowing a thing, but it's about acting on a thing that's known, right? So we can see that idea in, just in the name of Pinechas. And, we see that he acted. So the thing that he did, right, he turned away the wrath of Elohim from the sons of Israel. That word there is shuv, to turn away, right? We think about teshuvah, that is to turn, to return, to go back, to do again, to change, to withdraw, to bring back, reestablish, right? We see all to recompense, to answer. It's a response, right? So we see all of this in what the action that Pinechas did was something that turned away the wrath of Elohim. The wrath, right? The chama, the heat, right? The word is synonymous with the feminine now, meaning heat or range. So when we think about what was going on, the gross iniquity that was happening with the people, that caused some heat inside of the Almighty, right? That caused his wrath to be kindled, right? When we sin, when we transgress against Yahweh, what's owed to us is what? Is the wrath of Yahweh. When we look at Nahum, we look at Nahum chapter 1. Nahum chapter 1 verse 2, it says, Elohim is jealous and Yahweh revenges. And Yahweh revenges and is furious. That word right there, furious, is chama. It actually says he's the Lord. He's the Lord of fury, right? He is the Lord of fury. So when we deal with the Almighty, when we're on his side, right, we don't have to deal with his fury, right? His fury is not for us when we are going according to his will and to his ways, right? But when we step outside of that, right, there's heat over there, right? There's wrath over there. There's rage that's over there waiting.
The wrath and heat are like the same type of indignation, like when it talks about
he's a consuming fire.
That's where I was going.
Yeah.
Right there. That our Elohim is a consuming fire.
He is a consuming fire. right? So when we're outside of his will, right, we don't have no protection from that fire. When we step outside of the covering of the Almighty, when we step outside of his fence that he has created for us, right? When we step outside of his boundaries, we're stepping away from his covering and into that wrath.
I was thinking about the burning bush, number one, but then also how whenever Moses went up to the top of the mountain, the people just saw fire at the top of the mountain. That's what they saw, is fire at the top of the mountain. And Moses was like walking around in the fire.
Well,
he wasn't getting burnt.
Yeah, just like the bush, right? You brought the bush up first. The bush was burning, but it wasn't consumed.
Yeah, the bush wasn't being consumed, but there was fire engulfing it. Same with the mountain. Moses is in the fire, and he's not getting consumed. The fire isn't for to consume him, because he's on the Most High side. But if anybody else came and touched the mountain, if anybody else came other than Joshua and just touched the bottom of the mountain, they would be done.
Right. You said other than Joshua. But when it said that, it didn't say other than Joshua, right? It said, oh, wait. Okay, good. I pushed something I shouldn't have pushed. Okay, so, yes. So, but it's interesting that you bring up Joshua, which we'll go into a little later. But the idea is that we want to dwell on here is that the fact that Yahweh and his character is unchanging. He is a consuming fire. He's on that bush, and that bush is burning, but it's not being consumed. Why? Because it's a picture of being inside of the will of Yahweh. Moses is on that fiery mountain, right? Where the mountain is literally on fire, and the smoke is rising up from the mountain. But he's not being consumed. Why? Because he's in the will of the Almighty. Joshua came to the foot of the mountain. He was down there where no other person could be at. And he wasn't consumed. Why? Because he's inside of the will of Yahweh, who is the Lord of fury. Right? So again, when we look at this, what's going on here, because of the actions of the people, there was wrath and fury now owed to the people. And then the actions of Pinechas, his actions turned away the wrath. Okay, so according to verse 13, it says that let's just read verse 13 real quick. Numbers 25, the whole thing here, 25:13. It says, and it shall be to him and to his seed after the covenant of everlasting priesthood, because he was ardent for his Elohim and made atonement for the children of Israel. The action that was done by Pinechas made atonement for the sons of Elohim. So again, we talked about the idea of covering, right? If the Most High he is a consuming fire, that's what he is, right? But inside of his will, we have a covering. we have protection from that consuming fire, right? We can be inside of what he is, that thing that should normally destroy us, right? Doesn't, right? We're not affected by it, right? Because we're covered by his protection. So we see the same idea here when we look at this thing, that the action that Pinechas performed made atonement for the sons of Israel. Kafar, that word is kafar, to cover, right? To cover, to expiate or condone, to placate or cancel, right? There was a debt that was accrued by Israel. That debt was wrath on account of the sin, right? So there was a sin debt that was accumulated by Israel because of the gross iniquity that they had got into in terms of joining themselves to these foreign gods and allowing themselves to be joined to these foreign women who were causing them to go astray from the will and the ways of Yahweh. Because of that, wrath was then owed to them, right? But then, because of the actions of Pinechas, that debt was disannulled, right? That debt was forgiven. It was cleansed.
So one person out of Israel was able to be killed, and then that was like good for everybody.
Yeah. Right. So what's going on? This is actually, when you think about it in the context, is going on in the midst of everything else, right? Because Yahweh, because of the fact that they were joined, let's go back. Because of the fact that they were joined, if we go back and look at verse 4, where Yahweh says to Moses, take all the leaders of the people and hang them up before Yahweh, before the sun, so that the burning displeasure of Yahweh turns away from Israel. And Moshe said to the judges of Israel, each one of you kills his men who were joined to Baal Peor. So they're kind of in the process already. They're kind of in the process of eliminating these wicked ones who were manifesting this wickedness.
What verse was that?
4 and 5. Verse 4 and verse 5. So when we look at verse 4 and verse 5, we see that it has already been put into Yahweh has already commanded for these people to be dealt with. Right. So this thing that Pinechas is doing seems to be kind of a culmination of what was already kind of systematically being done. But we see, in spite of the fact that this judgment is going forth, you have this blatant disregard for the judgment of the Almighty. You have this blatant disregard for the judgment of Yahweh going on kind of simultaneously with the judgment that's going on. So in other words, they're already getting judged by Yahweh. They're already being judged, and the people are still going crazy in spite of the fact.
That makes me so upset, because how they acted back then is exactly how we act now.
Yeah.
Where it's like, you know, things things can't get any worse for us as far as, you know, where we're at, but we still are gonna be disobedient. We're still not gonna heed to wisdom.
Right. And that's exactly what's going on here. So
they're getting judged, they're getting the belt, and they still are acting up.
Right. Mm-hmm. And we know people like that. But
that's
right.
That's what let me know that was us.
Oh, wait. Hold on 1 second. Okay, go ahead. What you say, Chris?
Yeah, so you know, read the Bible and seeing the hard-headedness and the stiff-neckedness of the people, the children of Israel, is what let me know that we were those people, because the same behavior that they exhibited in the wilderness and their whole history is the same thing that is plaguing us today. And that's what made me initially think, like, man, this sounds exactly like us.
Yeah, we are a wicked people, stiff-necked,
can't correct us
people. Right, that's just what we do in the face of judgment. We at the very bottom of the situation. Judgment is happening right now, and still we can't turn aside from the wickedness. Right, yeah. This is exactly what's going on right here in the scriptures that we're looking at, and this is exactly what's going on with his actual people, even as we speak. Okay, so this is this is kafar, right? You have the open palm. You have the open palm, which covers. You have the open mouth, which declares, which speaks, right? Which blows. And then you have the man's head. So kafar is the picture of a covering, right? To cover the mouth with the open hand to stop pronouncement against the man's head, right? The open hand that stops the judgment that's pronounced against man's head, right? So when we see the actions of Pinechas, this is what we see here, right? We see because of what he has done, he stopped Yahweh stopped the plague, he stopped the judgment against the people, and accepted his action as atonement for, you know, what they were doing. Okay, so verse 12 says, therefore say, behold, I give him my covenant. Talking about Pinechas. And it shall be for him and his descendants after him a covenant of perpetual priesthood, because he was jealous for his Elohim and made atonement for his sons of Israel. So when we think about the priesthood was for the sons of Aaron's sons, right? Aaron was a Levite, and for his sons, they were who the priests were, you know, those were the ones who were going to be the priests. So Aaron had 4 sons, two died. Eleazar was next in line, and then Pinechas was the son of Eleazar, who was next in line. And so now what this is saying here, because of what of this, now it says that it shall be for him and his descendants after him a covenant of a perpetual priesthood. So because there was actually before this, there would have been two lines that would have been eligible to be the priest. Eleazar's line and the hold on, let me look at this. Ithamar was the other son. Ithamar was the other son of Aaron. So before this, it should have been the sons of Eleazar and Ithamar would be eligible for the priesthood. But because of this thing that Pinechas has done now, the sons of his sons, Pinechas's lineage were the ones who were going to be eligible for the priesthood based on these actions that he has done, because he was jealous for Elohim, right? Because he was jealous for Yahweh. That word there is kana. Kana, to be jealous, envious, to be zealous.
What does that
mean? How your sister Ariel is jealous of mommy. Right? So anytime she sees little Moshe coming around and trying to get up on mommy, then you have Ariel who's zealous for mommy, and then she says she wants to go and get in between. Right? She wants mommy all to herself. Right? When we think back over to Numbers chapter 5, where it talks about the husband and the law of jealousy, where if he suspects that his wife is doing things outside of their marriage, right? Because he's jealous of his wife. He wants his wife all to himself, right? Yahweh wants his people all to himself, right? So Pinechas being jealous for Elohim is wanting for the people of Yahweh only to be for Yahweh. And when there's things in the way, he wants to get those things out of the way, right? He only wants for, when we think about the idea of Elohim, when we say Shema Yisrael, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh is our Elohim. Yahweh is our Elohim. We allow for Yahweh to be our mighty one and no other, right? When we proclaim that he is Elohim, we say that he is the one that is mighty over us alone, right? He alone, right? So when we are zealous for that relationship to remain intact, we do the things which keep it that way. And so we see that Pinechas saw this gross iniquity that was going on in the sight of Moshe and all of Israel in the open, he wasn't having it, right? And he what? Kana? It literally means jealous or zealous.
Are you going to talk about the bloodthirst of Levi?
I wasn't going to say anything about it. What were you thinking about it?
Well, you talk about it all the time when you talk about it.
Well,
and how, like, golden calf and the bloodthirst.
Yeah. Okay. So you probably can't hear Tirsa's in the background calling to my remembrance the idea of the bloodlust of Levi. And so actually when you look at this, we can see character traits that are inside of Pinechas that remind us of his, the people that come before him, whether it be Aaron or whether it be Moshe, right? His father and his uncle, the people who share his DNA, right? We think about Moshe whenever he saw that injustice that was going on, when he realized that the people that were under the hand of Pharaoh was his people, and he recognized the injustice that was going on. He went into action, right? When we look at now, I think the difference is when we look at Aaron, Aaron has some problems with consistency, right? Because we can see where he is at times ready to jump into action, but not always for righteousness, let's say. When we think about the idea of the golden calf, the first thing he did was jump into action to actually make the golden calf. But once Moses came down, in his wrath, then now he's ready to jump into action to stand up for righteousness and say, we're on the side of the Most High. But dealing with this idea of the bloodlust of Levi, if we go all the way back to Levi, right, and think about the thing that happened with Dinah and Shechem, Levi is one of the ones that comes up with the idea to go down here and do all of this killing, to avenge his sister, which, they kind of overboard with what they did, right? It's but we see that. So I think that's the first example that we see in terms of Levi, with this whole kind of a bloodlust in the DNA. Again, the example coming back with the killing of the people who were not on Yahweh's side. That was done by who? The Levites. They were the priests, and they slaughtered animals, right? That was part of what they did. We can, Yahweh, I believe, used Levi and accentuated their gifts that they were born with, to slay. But here again we see with Pinechas, who again saw this injustice and he jumped into action. And again, as the action that he did brought atonement to the people. So Hebrews 11:6 says, but without belief it is impossible to please Elohim. For he who comes to Elohim has to believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who earnestly seek after him. You think about the idea of earnestly seeking, diligently seeking. We think about, again, going backwards to Pinechas and his zealousness, right? He had a strong desire inside of him to do the will of Yahweh, and things that was outside of the will of Yahweh, he had a strong desire to also correct those things, right? So when we think about what there is to gain from Pinechas is dealing with the idea of, it's not just about knowing about the things that Yahweh has and wants you to be doing or to be done. It's not just about knowing it, right? It's about having a strong desire inside. If you got a strong desire for some cake, the only way that you appease that strong desire is to actually get the cake, right? And eat the cake, right? So we're talking about a manifestation of that which is driving you within, right? A manifestation of that which is driving you from within. So Pinechas could have looked and saw what was going on and just been utterly disgusted by the thing.
Shook his head.
Yeah, he could have just been like SMH.
Wag his head.
Right? But he stepped into action and stood up for righteousness' sake.
Was it vigilante or was it certified? Like, did he have a right?
I think it was vigilante, and his vigilantiness was certified after the fact. I would say,
because he was like the judge and the executioner of that man.
Right. Now you could say because of his position in the family, it's possible that he was part of the elders and judges who was dealing with what was actually going on already. Because remember, they was already dealing with this iniquity that was going on. So it could be that Pinechas was already in the act of dealing with these people. When aside from that, in spite of all of that, they just kept on going with the iniquity. So I guess in that regard, but it seems as if because of the way that he was rewarded after the fact, it seemed like he was over and above what was already going on, right? But it's because of that strong desire inside of him that he didn't just let be a strong desire, but he acted on it. He manifested. He allowed what was driving him internally to be manifest. Bereshit 15:1 says, after these events, the word of Yahweh came to Avram in the vision saying, do not be afraid, Avram. I am your shield. Your reward is exceedingly great. You think about, I want to just think about this idea here that the Most High was speaking to Avram of the fact that Yahweh is his shield and your reward is exceedingly great. Well, this is not really abstract here. This is just exceedingly great. It's kind of combined with this idea here of being the shield, as far as the Most High being the protector of Avram because of his obedience. Right? Because Yahweh said go and he just went. Right? Not because Avram said, oh, well, that sounds like a good idea. And then that was just the end of it.
Oh, a good idea just to pick up.
Yeah. But because he actually went and did that. Right? So we see that when there is obedience to that strong desire, that unctioning that happens inside of you, that when you get that word from the Almighty, he becomes what? A protector, right? And your reward is exceeding great. Well, that really is dealing with your ability now to be inside of the fire, right? Your ability to be inside of in close proximity with the Almighty, right? To be in his presence, right? When there is obedience to his will, right? When there's an actual manifestation of, what it is he's actually leading you to do, right? It's easy to say that, yeah, he wants me to do this, that, and the other thing. But those things have to be made manifest, right? There has to be action involved, right? And when that is, right, when there is manifestation that is, that comes forth, you are able to be inside of the presence of the Most High, and you receive what? Just like Pinechas received what? A covenant of peace.
And that's what, like the shield, the reward,
right? That covenant of peace. That reward is the being connected with the Almighty. Right? We live in a place where it doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. Peace doesn't make sense in this world that we live in. Right? Because we have so much stuff going on around us.
I was thinking about when it said shield, when we was talking about the covering, protection,
mm-hmm.
And it's a you think about a shield, you think about defense.
Yeah.
It's a defensive structure that protects you against something that could be coming after you.
But yes, I don't want to say but, I want to say and when we think about it in that regards, it's a protection from what? It's a protection from the wrath. Yeah. And it's also a protection from those things which are outside. Right? It's a protection from both.
Inside and outside. It's a fence.
It's a protection from all that could potentially be against us. Yeah. Okay, so John 5:28 and 29 says, do not marvel at this, because the hour is coming in which all those in the tomb shall hear his voice, and shall come forth those who have done good to resurrection of life, and those who have practiced evil matters to resurrection of death. Right? So again, one of these two things, life or death or judgment is coming for us, right? Depending on how we respond, depends on what we get. But there's no neutrality here. There's nothing in the middle, right? Either you manifesting goodness or you manifesting evilness. Yeah. One of the two, right there. But there has to be an action that takes place. And if you're not on one side, you're on the other. So Pinechas, if he would have just sat back and watched, what side is he on? Right? He's on the evil side. He's practicing evil because he's sitting there witnessing this gross iniquity going on in the sight of all the people, and he's not doing anything. Okay, so think about the grandfather of Pinechas, Aharon. Think about what he did and what he didn't do. What are some of the things he didn't do? Well, you said it was a lie. I thought you was going to come right out with it.
Yeah. He didn't do anything when Moses hit the rock 2 times.
Right. Okay. So yes, he didn't do anything when Moses hit the rock 2 times. We just talked about that just the other week, right? That was an instance where he exhibited something that Pinechas did the exact opposite. When he witnessed wickedness happening, he jumped into action. He wasn't like, did you see what they was doing over there? He just jumped into action. And especially since it's exactly the same, because when we look back at those verses 4 and 5, there was an edict that went forth for the elders to go and take all the elder people that was out here doing wickedness, go out here and hang them up. Execute judgment against these people. So when you think about it, I just thought about this. When you think about what was going on, you had the elders of those that were sinning being taken care of. And then here we got the children of the elders, the very next generation, carrying on with the wickedness. Right? So even if we say that Pinechas wasn't part of the elders at that time, he sees his contemporaries, right, who are the children of the elders. He sees his contemporaries going crazy, and then he jumps into action on them. So when we think about Aharon, yes, he did the thing with the striking the rock thing. He did the thing with his sister and the golden calf, right? He allowed the golden calf to happen, right? Because he was the one who was in charge, right? So he allowed that to happen.
And he didn't tell his sister that was enough.
And he didn't stop his sister from coming up against Moshe, right? So he saw injustice. He saw unrighteousness going on, and he didn't do anything. Pinechas, his grandson, said, "Oh no, You're not going to sit up here and defile this place anymore, right? And kill them dead. So look at what the Most High does for those that are about his business, right? There was blessings that came as a result of it, right? He didn't change up what he said for the Levites or even for Aharon for that matter. But he just made it more specific now to the line of Pinechas, right? When we do that which is commanded by the Almighty, we receive blessing, right? It's just a simple thing. Deuteronomy 28 says, and it shall come to pass, if thou shalt hearken diligently. What verse is 28:1. If thou shalt hearken diligently unto the voice of Yahweh thy Elohim, to observe and do all his commands, which I command thee this day, that Yahweh thy Elohim will set thee on high above all nations of the earth. In verse 2, and all these blessings shall come on thee and overtake thee, if thou shalt hearken unto the voice of Yahweh thy Elohim. The Most High is all about blessings if.
Key, right? 28, verse 1?
Yeah. If you do this, then you get this. He's all about that, right? And then that's what we saw with Pinechas. Okay. So looking at that, is there any thoughts or questions or comments about Pinechas before we look at the daughters of Zelophehad?
Oh, my people. My namesake.
Okay.
No, has anything to say?
Nope.
I was just, thinking about tolerance and how
tolerance.
Yeah.
What you mean?
I mean, for areas where there's no direct Torah or no direct concreteness, that we can't have tolerance for people who disagree with us on different things, or yeah,
you said CAN.
Yes, can have tolerance.
Mm-hmm.
But when it's something that is as black and white as sin, and like there's that boundary there for sin, that we can't have a tolerance for that any longer,
right?
And I just see that Pinechas, he demonstrates that there's a line that can't be crossed, per se. You know what I mean? There's a line that once you cross that line, now we can no longer function together anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So
yes,
that's what I was looking at, because something that I'm working on as far as like with the children is learning how to be tolerant of others. But you have to have wisdom and discretion with that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So we definitely see that. We definitely see that with Pinechas, because again, looking at it, there was no gray area about what they was doing. It was blatant. It was, it was open for all to see. It wasn't something that was in the question. It wasn't like maybe they might be doing something that's not right.
They might be witnessing to these Midianites.
They were right. When you think about the Lord of Peor, that actual God was a God of the detestable things, and sexual demonstrations was a kind of a thing that was incorporated in the pagan worship. They was literally doing pagan worship in the midst of the people. And Pinechas stood up for righteousness. They said no. Okay, so let's look at this real quick here. Somebody want to read for us these verses here?
Then came the daughters of Zelophehad, the son of Hefer, the son of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh, the families of Manasseh, the son of Joseph, and these are the names of his daughters: Mala, Noah, and Hoglah, and Milcah, and Tirzah. And they stood before Moses and before Eleazar, the priest, and before the princes and all the congregation by the door of the tabernacle of the congregation, saying, "Our father died in the wilderness, and he was not in the company of them that gathered themselves against Elohim in the company of Korah, but died in his own sin and had no sons. Why should the name of our father be done away from among his family, because he hath no son? Give unto us therefore a possession among the brethren of our father." And Moses brought their cause before Yahweh. And Yahweh spake unto Moses, saying, "The daughters of Zelophehad speak right. Thou shalt surely give them a possession of an inheritance among their father's brethren. And thou shalt cause the inheritance of their father to pass unto them. And thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel, saying, If a man die and have no son, then ye shall cause his inheritance to pass unto his daughter. And if have no daughter, then ye shall his inheritance unto his brethren. And if have no brethren, then ye shall give his inheritance unto his father's brethren. And if his father have no brethren, then ye shall give his inheritance unto his kinsman that is next to him of his family, and he shall possess it, and it shall be unto the children of Israel a statute of judgment, as Yahweh commanded Moses." And Yahweh said unto Moses, Get thee up into this mount.
Okay, that's good. Did you read to 11?
Yeah.
What did you read to? 11?
11. 12, actually.
Yeah, 11 is what we need. Okay, so looking back, we see the question arises, right? Why should the name of our father be removed from among his clan because he had no son? Give us a possession among the brothers of our father. They wanted justice for the family name, right? Which, just because of the fact that the father had no sons, that name of his particular family was going to diminish, right? Because it was going to go according to whoever then they married, right? They wanted justice. They wanted it was no fault necessarily of his own. He tried at least 5 times. Right? We said very minimum, he tried 5 times to have a son. But they didn't sit back and wait for justice just to fall out of the sky. Right? They took action. Not in an inordinate way. Right? They didn't just go and do something crazily. Right? They went before Moses. And the priests, right?
And the princes.
They took this up before the now actually, when you think about it, when you think about the fact that because of the commandment that Yethro adds to the Torah in regards to the breakdown of responsibility for the elders, you could assume that they didn't just go up to Moses, right? Because you didn't just go to Moses. You went to whoever your elder was, right? But they didn't have an answer. It was too hard for them, right? So they took it up the chain, and it reached all the way up to Moses, right? So actually, when I see that, where it says, all of the people that they was before, what verse is that?
2. Verse 2.
They stood before Moses and before Eleazar the priest and before the leaders of all the congregation by the door of the tent of meeting, saying, I'm saying that according to the way that Torah was, that the law was in place, you went before.
Sorry.
You went before the elders,
Does she
right?
want to say anything?
Did you want to say something?
You can mute if you'd like to say something.
Okay, I guess not. Okay. All right. So the idea here is the fact that there was a perceived injustice, which was justifiable, and they didn't just sit back and do nothing. They saw a need and they went into action for that need to be met. Right? It's the same thing that we see with Pinechas. He could have said, well, I see this going on, but maybe one of them will do something.
I'm sure there's other men who didn't have sons.
Right. There's no way that they was the only people in all of Israel that this was the case for. But these ones was the ones that said, you know, we need justice for our family. And the only way they got it was by doing something. Okay. So what's the connection here? Well, we started talking about it already, actually. Action. Action is the connection, right? We can't just wait and expect for things to happen without doing anything.
I think that people, a lot of times, because we do have faith in the Most High, will say, well, Yah will provide. You know? Yeah. And we just gonna sit back and wait.
Yep, just wait
for him to provide. So if you need a job, or you know, you need a car, or you need
gonna drop a car out the sky in your lap.
You know, or a job, or
you gonna just be walking down the street and a big bag of money gonna fall and knock you down, hit you on the head.
Something might happen like that.
You ever know anybody with that happen? I think I found like $2 like a month ago outside of the store. It might have been $3. You gonna do nothing with that. You gotta go out and you gotta go out and get it.
And sometimes people kind of can enable people to do that because they might give them, they might see somebody who's not trying to find something. Okay, yes. They might enable them by being that, providing source. But for the most part, if you have a need or a desire, you have to get up and have action.
Right. There has to be some kind of action. And we could definitely see that with the daughters of Zelophehad, because I don't know, but they couldn't have been the only family in all of Israel that only consisted of daughters. They couldn't have been. I'm just gonna say they wasn't. Right, with all them people. But they was the ones who said, can this be? Can there be provision made for what we need? Action. Right? That's the connection. Action. Manifestation. Okay, so the choosing of Joshua. The choosing of Joshua. Let's look at this. And Moshe spoke to Yahweh, saying, let Yahweh, the Elohim of the spirits of all flesh, appoint a man over the congregation who goes out before them and comes in before them, who leads them out, brings them in, so that the congregation of Yahweh be not like sheep without a shepherd. And Yahweh said to Moshe, take Yehoshua, son of Nun, with you, a man in whom is the Spirit, and you shall lay your hand on him and shall set him before Eleazar, the priest, and before all the congregation, and give him command before their eyes, and shall put some of your esteem upon him, so that all the congregation of the children of Israel obey him. And he is to stand before Eleazar the priest, who shall inquire before Yahweh for him by the right ruling of the Urim, At his word they go out, and at his word they come in, both he and the children of Israel with him, all the congregation. And Moshe did as Yahweh commanded him, and took Yehoshua and set him before Eleazar the priest and before all the congregation, and laid his hands on him and commissioned him as Yahweh commanded by the hand of Moshe. So it said, let Yahweh, the Elohim of the spirits of all flesh, appoint a man. So when we look at this, when it says, let Yahweh, the Elohim of spirits of all flesh, spirits of all flesh. When we think about the idea of flesh and spirit, what are we talking about? What are we talking about when we're thinking about the idea of spirits and flesh? When we think about the ruach, what's the ruach? It's the breath, right? It's that thing that's inside of us that makes us alive, right? It should be that driving force that leads and guides the flesh, right? You got the spirit and you got the flesh, right? The flesh is that part that's touching the outside world, right? But that spirit is a part that touches the spiritual world, right? So we deal with Yahweh, the Elohim of the spirits of all flesh. Let him appoint a man. Right? And then what's it say? Take Yehoshua, son of Nun, with you, a man in whom is the spirit. Right? So we see what is said in the beginning in terms of, who was going to be a candidate. And then we see who is the one, right? Yehoshua, where it says a man in whom is the spirit. When we think about Joshua, right? When we see his track record, right? We talked about earlier when Moses will go up to the mountain, right? When Moses would go up to the mountain, it was said that, no one was supposed to follow him. No one else was supposed to go up. But Joshua was always there. Why? Because he is a man in whom is the spirit. Right? When we think about the spies going into the land, who was the ones that was there and ready to go? It was Caleb, right? And it was Yehoshua, and it was Joshua, son of Nun, right? Now we can just assume, that between the two, Yehoshua was the one that was, based on the other things that we see, that was, strong in the spirit, right? It was the only, the two of them was the only adults to go into the land. Why? Because those was the ones that was manifesting the thoughts and the ways of Yahweh, right? They didn't just have a mental knowledge of the Most High, right?
Does it say it was in him
or on him? It says, I don't know, depending on what verse what version you looking at. Let's see what the New American Standard Version says. New American Standard says a man in whom is the Spirit. Let's see here. 28. Let me just look at this in the
what verse is that?
27:18. That's what looks like. That's what it says.
So it's in him.
Yeah.
So
it was the inner.
So he was regenerated.
Force that was driving his deeds and actions.
So he was able to experience regeneration.
I guess he experienced a thing that was at the very least like unto it in regards to his ability to hear the Ruach and be led and guided by it. We can see by his actions that he was able to remain in obedience and follow the leading and guiding of the Spirit.
He was able to conquer his flesh, his carnality.
Yes, he was given. He was definitely given the ability to overcome his carnal mind.
Sorry.
So whatever that means for him, that's what happened, right? We see that manifest, right? And we see in Scripture, we see people who it is said that the Spirit of Yahweh actually dwelled in them, right? When we think about the new covenant, the idea of it really is a outpouring unto all men, right? We see individuals throughout the scriptures where it is said that the Spirit is dwelling on them, right? Or dwelling in them, right? But the idea of the new covenant is for that to be something that is experienced on a grander scale. So, I mean, I don't necessarily title it as regeneration necessarily, but I would say that the end result seems to be the same in terms of the ability to hear from the Father and be led and guided by that Spirit. So, when you think about Joshua, what's the connection? Action. Same thing, right? Joshua, we can look back at his track record and see there was action involved. right? He was trying to be close to the Most High from whenever we see him around, right? Whenever we see him mentioned, right? He's right there where Moses is, in the shadows of the presence, right? And we understand that that action is a manifestation of inner unctioning, right? It's a manifestation of inner unctioning. When we understand Joshua, we can see and realize that he was in tune with the plan of Yahweh. And the greatest example we see of that is with the spies going into the land. The plan was to go and conquer the people. It didn't matter who was there, right? The plan, according to the Most High, was to go in there and conquer the people and take over the land, right? So they was in tune with the plan, ready to take action, right? It was the others who were thinking about it from a carnal perspective who wasn't trying to do it, right? But we see, obviously, based on the choosing of Yehoshua, that he was one that was consistent with seeing and hearing and understanding the plan of the Almighty, and ready and willing to go and get that thing done. All right. Okay, let's look at a couple more things and then just be done with this. Anybody have any thoughts or questions or comments?
I just have one thought. I was thinking about connecting action with belief.
Say that again.
Connecting action with belief.
Yeah.
So, it's like, okay, instead of like, some people have like and I'm one of these people, so I'm talking about myself. I'm not talking about anyone else. Okay. But some people, me, we have this strong, I need it to be in front of me. I need to be able to understand it. I need to be able to comprehend it mentally. And I like to have that before I actually do it. I like to be able to understand something before I actually do it. But when it comes to the faith, sometimes you do things because the Most High said to do it. So for example, keeping the holy days might be an example. So my first holy day I kept, which was the Day of Trumpets, Yom Teruah. I went to work that evening, and I got there, and then I learned that I wasn't supposed to do it that way. But that was my very first, I just come into the faith like August, and I was in September, October. I was keeping the Shabbat for a month or two. But if I would have applied how I like to do things in my carnal mind, I would have known all the different regulations for it, and I would have known everything there was to know about it, and then I would have done it. But that's not the way that we should function. We should function by actively doing and then learning as we're doing it, So that's just for anyone who thinks like I think.
Wait a second. I'm confused by that.
What?
I feel like you justified just going to work on.
What?
Is that what you just did?
I didn't justify it, but I'm saying that I didn't know. I didn't have a knowledge of what like I didn't read all the verses, and I didn't get we was learning it on that day. So I get there, I get to the service, and then we read the the verses in the Torah that go over to the Day of Trumpets, you know? And so then when we're actually doing the Holy Day and reading about it, that's when I learned more about the day that I was doing. And then I learned that I should have done it different.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess I think the idea is that you was ready and willing to do the thing, but not necessarily having all of the intricacies of what you should be doing. So you had a mind to do it.
Yes.
Actually, even though you didn't know everything about it.
Yes.
Which, yes.
Like there's some people who say I gotta learn the whole Hebrew language.
Right.
And read the whole Torah in Hebrew.
Yeah.
And then I'll keep Shabbat.
Right.
I need to read it all and know it all, know the whole language, know the whole thing. And then I'll put the tassels on my clothes. You know, after I know everything, I understand everything. But the way that we see faith being done is that you hear and you're obedient to the word.
You go.
And you go. And then, sure, there might be some things that you're doing that is a little bit off, but as you're going, you'll receive correction, and that spirit will correct you over time. You'll be around people who will bring correction, you know? So the next Holy Day, I wasn't at work that day because I had an understanding of what the actual commandments said to do.
Right. Right. Okay. Okay. So I think
I wasn't justifying my.
Okay. I was just checking. Yeah. So the thought process, yes, that is the thought process. Yeah. Go.
Action.
Yahweh told Avram to go. He told him to leave from his people to the place that I show you.
Even Moses, it was like a day by day thing. If the cloud moved,
right,
then you would move, and there wasn't any itinerary.
Exactly. So,
sorry.
When we think about faith, when we think about belief in the Most High, it's about being ready and willing to go. It's about being ready and willing to do what the Most High is calling for to be done. And it's not necessarily about understanding why.
Yes.
You know.
Or even how.
Yeah, or how you gonna do it. I mean, planning is all fine and good, but the Most High is saying go over and see a man who got a pitcher of water and a donkey. You know what I mean? You're not gonna Google like where's their men at with pitchers of water and donkeys. Right? You just gonna go and look for the man, right?
I think I will Google it first.
Yeah, you'll be Googling it first, right? So we all need growth to happen, yes. Right? All right, so we want to just look at a couple of things here in the Brit Hadashah. Oh, this is Malachi. This is Malachi 2:1-4, where it says, "And now, O priest, this commandment is for you. If you do not hear, and if you do not take it to heart, to give esteem to my name, says Yahweh of hosts, I shall send a curse upon you, and shall curse your blessings. And indeed, I have cursed them because you do not take it to heart. See, I will rebuke your seed and scatter dung before your faces, the dung of your festivals. And you shall be taken away with it, and you shall know that I have sent this command to you as being my covenant with Levi, says Yahweh of hosts. My covenant with him was life and peace, and I gave them to him to fear. And he feared me, and he stood in awe of my name. The Torah of truth was in his mouth, and unrighteousness was not found in his lips. He walked with me in peace and straightness, and turned many away from crookedness. For the lips of a priest should guard knowledge, and they seek the Torah from his mouth, for he is the messenger of Yahweh of hosts. So when we look at this and think about what's going on with these people who were, had turned to wickedness, right? Where they were receiving curses because of their disobedience and their wickedness, right? But Yahweh saying his covenant was with Levi. It was a covenant of life and peace, which we've seen before, right? And I gave them to him to fear. So when we think about the priests and also thinking about us in Messiah as a nation of kings and priests, right? We fit right into this here situation, right? The Torah of truth should be in our mouth, right? The Torah of truth should be in our mouth, right? And unrighteousness not found in our lips, right? We should be. Now, again, when we think about the idea of truth being in our mouth and unrighteousness not being in our lips, we think about the idea of, rightness, uprightness, at the very least in our inward parts, right? It's in our mouth. But then the next verse here, right? He walked with me in peace and straightness and turned many away from crookedness. So again, we see a manifestation of what is within. Right? So it's not just about having those that truth within and the absence of unrighteousness, but actually walking with the Most High in peace. And when you think about walking with the Most High in peace, the whole reason why the covenant of peace was made with Pinechas in the first place. Why? Because of the manifestation of righteousness that he exhibited, right? The whole idea of thinking about if you do and keep my commandments, right? You think about the idea of not just knowing what it is that the Most High has for you to do, but actually walking in it and doing it, right? The way that we're able to walk in peace and uprightness or righteousness is what? Is by having an established relationship with the Father and not just knowing that he's right and good, but walking in rightness and goodness. Right? And turning others away from crookedness. Right? So how do we turn others away from crookedness? By doing it. By doing righteousness. Right? By exhibiting righteousness. Right? If we are the light of the world, right? That's how we're turning away many from crookedness. Right? From exhibiting, from manifesting straightness, from by making straightness a reality. Right? It does no good to know the things of Yahweh and for those things not to be manifest. What we just looked at here in Malachi is a perfect example of that, because those people, those ones that was priests at that time, was being chastised, right? And why are you getting curses on you? If you're breaking the commandments, if you're doing contrary to the will and the way of the Almighty. Malachi 2:8-9, right? But you, right? You were supposed to be walking in righteousness, right? And straightness. But you have turned from the way. You have caused many to stumble in the Torah. You have corrupted the covenant of Levi. Yahweh says Yahweh of hosts. And I shall make you despise and low before all the people, because you are not guarding my ways and are showing partiality in the Torah. Right? So again, we see the examples here given of what we are to be doing. And I'm saying we based on the fact that, we in Messiah are a nation of kings and priests, right? We are the light of the world. We are to go out and make disciples, right? We are to cause people to be learners and followers of Messiah, Yeshua, right? We are to function as, we're not priests, but we are to function as priests in terms of being those that turn not to turn people away from the way, but we are actually supposed to turn people to the way, right? Not be those that cause people to stumble in Torah, right? This is what they were being judged for doing, right? We need to be doing the opposite of this, right? Which, when we think about it, and in connection with what we've been looking at, is, manifesting righteousness, standing up for righteousness, not being one that stands by and allow unrighteousness to go on unchecked. Right, a few more verses here. Matthew 23.
Read it.
Yeah, read that.
Then Yahweh spoke.
Yeshua
spoke to the crowds and to his top ones, saying, "The scribes and the Pharisees sit on the seat of Moshe. Therefore, whatever they say to you to guard and do, but do not do according to their works, for they say and do not do. For they bind heavy burdens hard to bear and lay them on men's shoulders, but with their finger they do not wish to move them. And they do all their works to be seen by men. And they make their tefillin wide and lengthen the tzitzit of their garments. And they love the best place at feasts and the best seats in the congregation and the greetings in the marketplaces, and to be called by men Rabbi. But you do not be called Rabbi, for one is your teacher, the Messiah, and you are all brothers. And do not call anyone on earth your father, for one is your Father, he who is in heaven. Neither be called leaders, for one is your leader, the Messiah. But the greatest among you shall be your servant, and whosoever exalts himself shall be humbled, and whoever humbles himself shall be exalted."
Okay, very good. So let's look at this. Let's work backwards here. We see where Yeshua is dealing with these people, and he tells these people, right, who want to be called by men, Rabbi. When we think about the idea of, we've gotten to a place in where we are now, where we think of rabbi as being equivalent to teacher, where rabbi actually doesn't mean teacher, but you called your teacher rabbi which again doesn't mean teacher, but that's what you called your teacher. It literally means great one, right? High exalted one is what Rab. So, but you called your teacher high exalted one, right? So now we're in a time where we're, removed from all of this, and somebody who is a Jewish or a Israelitish teacher, calls himself rabbi without actually thinking about what is being said. Now, Yeshua is calling this practice out and saying, you putting too much on this individual, calling him high exalted one, right? Now what we can't say is, I wouldn't say that Yeshua here is removing the whole idea of titles altogether, but it's about the place that you're putting these individuals. Because, what are you to say that a human being doesn't really have a father on earth?
You can't call somebody father.
You can't call somebody Abba. You can't call somebody daddy, right? He's not saying that, right? But we have to.
Leader or elder.
Right. He's not saying that. But in the context of dealing with what these people did in terms of the high esteem that they placed on these individuals was a little bit too much.
So what is that? Because
but more than that, because of the things that they were doing. Because if we go back with dealing with these people, he's saying, these people, they sit on the seat of Moses, of Moshe. Therefore, whatever they say, do. If they're teaching you the things of Yahweh, do those things and guard them and do them. But do not do according to what they do, right? For they say and do not do, right? So there's a problem here. There's a discrepancy with these people are teaching the Torah. They're teaching you the scriptures and rightness and uprightness and straightness, right? But they're not doing it. They're not doing it, right? He says, for they bind heavy burdens hard to bear and lay them on men's shoulders. But with their fingers, they do not wish to move them. So in other words, they're causing the people to be bound by this or that thing, but they're not holding their own selves to that same standard. I'm going to put a heavy burden on you, but I'm not going to touch that burden, not even with my finger. I'm not going to even touch the thing that I'm causing you to carry. What was you gonna say?
No.
So again, now thinking about that in regards to what we're looking at here, again, we talking about knowing and doing. We're talking about manifesting the will of Yahweh. So the Pharisees, what they was doing was they're teaching the word of Yahweh. And Yeshua said, you listen to them. Listen to what they say, because they teaching you right. But there's a problem with what they're doing.
Don't do what they're doing.
Don't be like them, because they're going to sit up there and have people calling them high exalted one, but they ain't even doing the stuff.
I'm sorry, dude. I have to say it. To me, that's just like someone who wants to call rabbi, and then they don't keep the Shabbat. But they're teaching everybody to keep the Shabbat. But when you look at their Facebook pictures, they're at a restaurant hanging out on a Shabbat. And then they're like, everybody keep the Shabbat, but they're not trying to do it. Like they're teaching it, and then they're not walking in it.
It's exactly like that. So Yeshua is trying to tell his top ones, which is a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to do, to be able to look at somebody and listen to what they say when in fact they're not doing what they're telling you to do. He's basically telling them something that's physically impossible. Because once we see these people doing something that they're not supposed to do, how you gonna sit up here and tell me something and you can't even do it? That's how we do, right? He's telling them, look, these people, they're teaching you right, but they're not doing right. So he's teaching them really a spiritual principle, is that we have to be able to be, because the Spirit's going to do that inside of us. The Spirit is going to cause us to see the Spirit in other people and ignore the flesh. The Spirit in me is going to cause me to be able to see the Spirit in you and follow after that. But also that same Spirit in me is going to be able to differentiate between your flesh and your spirit. Right? Right. That's discernment, right? That's discretion. Right? That's the working. That's how the Ruach HaKodesh works. Right? So again, we look back, we think about, putting all this together. It's about understanding the plan of the Most High. It's about understanding the Spirit of Yahweh inside of you. It's about following the Spirit in you and seeing the Spirit and being able to discern the Spirit. All right, let's look at this, because I think this is the last verse we're going to look at here. Let's look at this because again, we see the apostle of Yeshua. The apostle of Yeshua is giving us some information here, which is going to help us to see that Yeshua is not really saying nobody could be your teacher. Right, because the one who taught Paul, right, the one who Paul was a messenger of, Paul was a messenger of Yeshua, right? He went out and he spoke the words of Messiah, right? So look at what he says here. Read that there.
I call upon you, therefore, I the prisoner of the Master, to walk worthily of the calling with which you were called, with all humility and meekness, with patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to guard the unity of the Spirit and the bond of peace, one body and one spirit, as you also were called in one expectation of your calling, one Master, one belief, and one immersion, one Elohim and Father of all, who is above all and through all and in you all. But to each one of us favor was given according to the measure of the gift of Messiah. That is why it says, when he went up on high, he led captive, and he gave gifts to men. But what does he went up mean? Except that he also first went down into the lower parts of earth. He who went down in is also the one who went up far above all the heavens to fill all. And he himself gave as emissaries, and some as prophets, and some as evangelists, and some as shepherds and teachers for the perfecting of the set apart ones, to the work of service, to a building up of the body of Messiah, until we all come to the unity of the belief and of the knowledge of the Son of Elohim, to a perfect man, to the measure of the stature of the completeness of Messiah, so that we should no longer be children tossed and borne about by every wind of teaching, by the trickery of men and cleverness, unto the craftiness of leading astray, but maintaining the truth in love. We grow up in all respects and into him who is the head, Messiah, from whom the entire body, joined and knit together by what every joint supplies according to the working by which each part does its share, causes growth of the body for the building up to itself in love.
Okay, very good. So when we look here at what is being talked about here, looking back, thinking about, what we just looked at as far as the words of Yeshua, when we see here, one of the things that Yeshua put into place, right, was what? When we look over here at, let me see this here, and he himself, this is speaking about Yeshua, gave some as emissaries, or what's translated in the King James as apostles, which was, the disciples, right? And some as prophets, and some as evangelists, and some as shepherds. It says pastors in the King James, and teachers. For what? For the perfecting of the set apart ones. In other words, the way that the set apart ones, the way that the holy ones, the righteous ones, those that are followers of Yeshua, the way that they are perfected is how? Is by what? The apostles and the prophets and the evangelists, the ones who go and set things in order, right? The ones that are hearing from the Most High and providing a direction and a word from the Almighty, right? Those that are going out, and preaching the gospel of Messiah to the world, right? Bringing people in to the kingdom, right? And those that are dealing with these ones that is brought in by these people, dealing with them and shepherding them and leading and guiding them in the way of the Most High. And the teachers, the ones that are providing instructions and teachings about this life that we live, right? This is the way that we are perfected, by having these things in place, you know. So when we think about these things, which, you know, happen to be positions, right? Yahweh, Yeshua himself, he's putting these things in place. So we can't say that we don't have teachers and pastors and, you know, these things. That's not the point that Yeshua was making over here, you know, back in Matthew's. But when we think about these things being manifest in a proper way, it's all dealing with the leading and guiding of the Ruach HaKodesh. Right? It's all dealing with each one of these individuals is not doing things unto his own self. Right? He's doing things according to the Spirit of Yahweh. He's teaching, he's shepherding, he's evangelizing, prophesizing, you know, going out and being that sent one that's going out in the name of Yeshua. Right? So in that regard, if we're saying that all of these individuals that are inside of the umbrella of this you know, quote unquote fivefold ministry are actually going out and being the voice of Messiah, right? And going out and doing Messiah's work in the earth, right? Until what? Until we all come to the unity of the belief of the knowledge of the Son of Elohim, to a perfect man, right? So Yeshua is basically, through the apostle, is basically saying that we need these people that are what? The same reason why he needed Yehoshua leading the people, right? So that the people are not as sheep without a shepherd. Right? The same thing that was true for Israel going into the promised land is true for his people even now, as we wander in the wilderness, that he doesn't want for us to be a people that are just sheep wandering without a shepherd. Right? There needs to be instruction. There needs to be hearing from the Most High. Right? There needs to be, turn it off. There needs to be people going out and expanding the kingdom of Yahweh. Why? So that we should no longer be children. Right? And this is important because we got a lot of people who, you know, have, you know, been in this so-called faith for a long time, right? But the point is what? So that we should no longer be children. But we're supposed to grow up in this thing that we do, right? And become adults in the scriptures, right? In this word, right? We can't be, he says right here, so that we should no longer be children, tossed and borne about by every wind of doctrine. You know, there's so much stuff that's on the internet that you can go, and I say this all the time, people can go and anything you want to hear.
Please press 1 to mute or unmute yourself. 2 to lock or unlock the conference.
Anything you want to hear.
The conference.
Hold on, what is it?
6 to decrease or increase.
Anything you want to hear, you can go and find on YouTube. If you want to find it, you can look for what you want to find, and you can find it, and you can hear it and listen to it. But the problem is that sometimes we need to hear something that we're not looking for. You know what I'm talking about? Sometimes we need to hear something that we're not looking for. That's how YouTube works. You put something in the search, what you're looking for, and then you find it, then you look at it, then you watch it, and you listen to it, and it teaches you. Right?
You said it teaches you.
But sometimes you need to hear something that you wasn't looking for.
His keys is raising his hand.
What? No.
What'd you say?
I said kind of like Google.
Oh.
Yes, exactly like Google.
Then they bring up related videos afterwards.
Yeah. Things that's related to the thing that you was looking for. So you only gonna find what you looking for when you look it. Right? But you need somebody to say, hold on, man. You tripping right there. You need to come back over in the center a little bit. You going off in the left field a little bit. Come back over here, something.
Well, that's what John and them say about me. They say I'm going left field now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I done left my first love. And, you know, my wife said I'm in the cold. All of that stuff.
Yeah. Well, I guess the same thing could be said about. I mean, it could just be reversed.
Yeah, I do believe that it is a cult. You know that.
I mean, the thing about it is that the problem is that at the end of the day, when we talk about the new covenant, and this is what mainstream Christianity don't understand. We talk about the new covenant. The new covenant brings you into what? The commandments. The new covenant brings you into following after the will and the way of the Almighty. When we talk about the idea of being a perfect man, we talk about to the where it says until we all come to the unity of the belief and of the knowledge of the Son of Elohim, to a perfect man, to the measure of the stature of the completeness of Messiah. We think about the completeness of Messiah. What in the world is that? The completeness of Messiah is the manifestation of the Ruach HaKodesh in man. So we can't we can't give those things credence. I understand, because that's what they are, because they're, on the other side looking in. But in general, when we are actually following after the unadulterated word of Yahweh, when it actually looks like the path that's been plotted out for us in the entirety of the scriptures, right? When we're not just dealing with because when you think about mainstream Christianity, anything and everything that they have to say is based on that so-called New Testament perspective. So they're gonna beat you up with the New Testament all over the place, only because they don't have the foundation of the Tanakh to define these terms that they throwing at you, this grace that they want to beat you over the head with when they don't even understand what it is, right? The spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh, is supposed to bring us into all truth and bring all the things. Yeshua said to his disciples, this thing is going to bring to remembrance all the things that I taught you. Well, what was he teaching? The Tanakh. He was teaching the Torah. That's what he was teaching. Now, all those things are going to be brought back to your remembrance. That's what the Ruach came to do. So again, when we look at this thing that what we've been talking about here, in terms of being a light, in terms of standing up for righteousness, in terms of being those ones who is going to look at unrighteousness and call it unrighteousness and seek to pull those that are in it out of it. When we look at Yeshua is saying, listen to what these people are saying, because they're teaching you what? They're teaching you the Torah. They might not be doing the Torah, but they're teaching it to you so that you can do it. He's saying don't call them people high exalted one, right? Because they are hypocrites. They're shining light on you, but it's some light that's not connected to themselves because they're not doing the light. But then now through the apostle, he's saying that there needs to be in place those that are shining light on the body of Messiah, but that light is something that's emanating out of them and not something that's external. As if to say the Pharisees was walking around with flashlights, right? Shining light. But these people who he talking about, these apostles and prophets and evangelists and shepherds and teachers, they are the lights, right?
We're supposed to be living epistles without, walking around.
Right. But it's
teaching people without using.
But it's something that's emanating out from you. Just like when we look back, when the father of the spirits of men chose the leader who was Yehoshua, and he was chosen. Why? Because he was one who the spirit dwelled in. He didn't have for his people Israel to be without a shepherd. So the shepherd that he chose was one who was filled with the Ruach. Right? He didn't want Israel to be a people who was just sheep without a shepherd. And we're talking about the same thing right here with Ephesians 4, in chapter 4, in terms of not wanting for these people to be just tossed to and fro as children. Because whether we're talking about people in mainstream Christianity, or we're talking about people who, all that they do is just look on YouTube and find what they want to find and do those things. People who are not in a position to accept correction, right? You want to just be able to come to your own truth, and live on your own. The Most High didn't put us. He did not create this body to be fragmented. The body of Messiah is nothing but what? It's nothing but Israel, which is a nation, right? Which is a collection of individuals, which always had what? Judges and elders and judges, right? And leaders in place, people to be able to help those, right? The daughters of Zelophehad, they went for help because they needed help, right? They had a problem, right? And they went to those that was able to help them, their brothers and their sisters, for help, for justice, right? They didn't just go and just take what they felt was theirs, right? They went about it rightly and in order. And so this thing that Yeshua has set up with this new covenant thing is just really an extension of what we saw back with Israel as government, right? So that's the problem with Israel. They don't want to be governed. They want to do all of the things that so-called pertains to Israel, but don't you dare try to tell me nothing when that's really the foundation of Israel was governance. If there wasn't no governance, Pinechas would have just sat there and just let them people sit up there and defile the camp.
pretty much the theme of the Christian church is just to pretty much serve the Creator their way.
Yeah.
You know, they don't want to,
which is idolatry.
Yeah, they don't want to, you know, fall in line with the order that he set up. You know, they kind of, oh well, you know, we don't have to do none of that anymore. It's just about believing.
There's all kinds of order over there, but it's disorder. Right. They got all kinds of order and people set up. They got all kinds of government. I just don't know what that government's based on.
But I'm saying the order I'm talking about is the order that was ordained, that was passed down.
Yeah,
you know, that was given to Moses, and you know, so there's an order, but they're not following that order.
Right,
that comes from Yahweh.
Right.
I can see in this like that stream because you know Joshua definitely he became a leader in the place of Moses, and so there are going to be leaders per se. You know? Yeah, there are going to be leaders.
Right. Right.
So people they take what Yeshua said about not calling anyone father and rabbi, and then they want everybody to be equal.
Right.
Or they want like a democracy per se.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where it's not always about democracy.
It's not always going to be a democracy.
It's not always about democracy. You know, we don't really have an example in the scriptures of that kind of setup.
Yeah.
You know,
everybody wants to be the Christians are king Democrat. King Democrat.
Whatever the majority of the people come up with, that's what you should be doing.
But that's our people. Our people are so divided just because everybody wants to do their own thing. Nobody wants to fall in line. Nobody wants to work together. Nobody wants to come together. You know what I mean? Everybody, oh no, you do your thing, I do my thing.
Yeah.
Which leads us to the place we're at. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's so much democracy that
we've all agreed.
We've
agreed to be separated.
Yes.
I think spatially in terms of, you know, we're here in Pittsburgh. You know, we just went down to North Carolina to meet with some people from Buffalo. Right? And you know, we have our own situations, but I think based on, you know, this meeting, I feel like it's necessary to figure out how we all in our separate places can be able to help each other in some kind of way with a common cause. Because at some point it got to be about unity. Because with everybody being separated, what you gonna get done? Nothing. You ain't gonna get nothing done. Now, I'm saying spatially, we can't be together all the time. But we have to be there has to be a way for more people to be connected to more people for the betterment of the people that's connected, right? Because, you know, I got something that you need. You got something that I need. Right? You doing all kinds of stuff in that area, and I ain't doing nothing in that area. Right? And vice versa. But instead, we got experts in this over here. You want some of this, you go over there and get it. You want some of that, you go over there and get it. Right?
Hey man, I got Gentiles trying to team up with me left and right. Like, yeah, man, we need to work together and this, that, and the other. You know, blah, 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 we can do this. I try to work with my own people, my folks.
You ain't with it.
Like, oh, well, you know, do my thing.
Right. But at the end of the day, when we're looking at this and we see what Paul's talking about here, that's how we become perfected. In other words, you as an individual don't have all the answers. You don't have all the, he didn't set it up like that. He didn't set it up for everyone to be the one who's going to do everything. Individuals ain't going to have it. Go ahead. You want to say something?
I'm sorry, I turned my mic on. I think somebody else was talking.
No, go ahead.
Okay. We forget that the Ruach has given us gifts specifically according to Yahweh's will. We don't have all of the gifts of the Ruach, but He's distributed those to individuals as He's seen fit. Those gifts are not for that individual. They're not to benefit that individual directly. They're for the perfecting of the body, you know. And if the body does not recognize that they need the gifts that lie within a person that they might not like, they might not want to be around, they might not want to even obey, not obey, but submit to that gift in that person. This is how we lose out. This is how we miss becoming mature. Because you have to get over seeing each other in the flesh. We have to get over knowing each other after the flesh and begin to know each other after the spirit. So when you do that, you can't hate or dislike or want to prefer an individual, because what you see in that person then will be Yahweh. And I have to assume that everyone who is in the way because they want Yahweh and they want to obey Yahweh. But Yahweh is in me, Yahweh is in you. All those saints who have been given the Ruach and received the gifts are necessary for our growth and for our maturity. And it's not that some of us want to protect what we think is God's ministry. I mean, it's their ministry, not God's, theirs. They feel like, you know, when Yahweh sends somebody their way, they don't want to recognize that it's Yahweh coming to them himself in that person. They want to look at that person and say, oh, I don't like the way they look. I don't like the way they talk. I don't like that they might be trying to take over my ministry. You know, they completely ignore the fact that, you know, Yahweh might be trying to tell them something and helping them in doing the ministry that is actually His, you know, for the perfecting of the saints and for the gathering in of those who are not yet saved. You know, so we really miss out when we ignore the message of unity and when we ignore the message of each one of us being one with the Father, with Messiah, and not realizing that, you know, if we reject one another, we reject a part of Him also, and we reject what He is offering to us through them. Okay, I'm done.
No, it isn't. Okay. Yes, absolutely. That's you know. Yeah. Okay, good. Okay. Yes, very good. Okay, so yeah. So we say all of that just to say that when we think about looking back, we look at Pinechas, we look at the fact that he did not just idly stand by and watch unrighteousness, right? He participated and he allowed the spirit, the inner unctioning inside of him to cause him to act. He acted upon righteousness, right? And we have to be, that has to be what we're about. We have to be about the kingdom of Elohim and the expansion of that kingdom. We have to be about figuring out, connecting with, people, whether they're near or far, uh, and gaining from the body the things that you need and supplying things to the body, the things that you have for the greater good. Pinchas could have in some self-righteousness just looked at the wickedness and just, like you said, just looked at it and just, that's a shame. But that's the equivalent of what we do when, we're not allowing the spirit in us to be manifest, right? If we're not doing anything, any work for the kingdom, right? We have to be able to do the work for the kingdom, right? So let the story of Pinchas and the daughters of Zelophehad and the character of Yehoshua, the examples that they put forth, be examples to us that we have to be about action, right? We have to be about doing the things that Yahweh will have for us to do, not just worrying about our own situation in terms of us as individuals, just walking in uprightness, but along with that, bringing others along with us. Okay, so that being said, are there any thoughts or questions or comments before we end this? Okay, all right. What? I know Moshe has some unintelligible things to say over there. Okay, thank you very much, Moshe. All right. All right. Okay, that being said, we will end this broadcast until next week.